right, so we missed a week, and we're going to catch up on not only the stories that we missed, but a story that I had wanted to talk about a while back. Welcome to a new episode of the Blerdcalibur podcast. It's me, your host with the most, Sen, and we're going to be jumping into some DC news, some Marvel news, some gaming news, and funny enough, a little bit of history. So, starting off our DC news. Let's talk about Chris Pine. So, as you know, Chris Pine played Steve Trevor in both the original Wonder Woman film and Wonder Woman 1984. And recently it came out that Chris was shocked that Warner Brothers was canceling Wonder Woman 3. Now, this is despite the fact that he was aware of Wonder Woman 1984 causing struggles in regards to both writing and the fact that DC was going through this major revamp inside of Warner Brothers in general, who was going through a major revamp because they were being purchased by another group. He was still surprised that DC was willing to cancel what they saw as a billion-dollar franchise, well, what he saw as a billion-dollar franchise, and essentially move on from working on Wonder Woman. Here's the thing. I think Chris Pine was a little bit deluded. So, yes, the original Wonder Woman film, I think, grossed somewhere near $1 billion. Hold on, let's go ahead and check to see exactly how much money the first Wonder Woman film actually made. The 2017 Wonder Woman film grossed a net total of $824 million. Wonder Woman 1984, on the other hand, only grossed $169.6 million. Now, that's with an asterisk next to it because Wonder Woman 1984 released during the height of COVID, so it was released directly onto HBO Max at the time, and then it was re-released onto theaters at, I think it was like maybe it was either simultaneously or maybe like a week or so later. So the fact that it only brought in less than $200 million is always going to have an asterisk next to it, because the question would always be, what would have happened if it was released in theaters just in general and people braved the pandemic to basically go out and watch it. But the problem is the reception of both of the films. The first film is widely regarded as a fantastic Wonder Woman film. Yes, it does have hiccups here and there in regards to the story that's being told, and it kind of falls flat in the third act by introducing a villain that really didn't have any build-up going into it, and then turning into like a CGI mess towards the last 15 minutes. But genuinely, the story from beginning to end in the first film is fantastic. It is a great journey. Wonder Woman 1984, not so much. Now, what was the major difference between the two? Well, the first Wonder Woman film fell under Zack Snyder's purview. Now, if you follow the channel for any extent of time, you know that I was a Snyder supporter and diehard. The man, to me, could do no wrong. However, in regards to Wonder Woman, I can honestly say I believe Wonder Woman was perfect underneath Snyder's tent. It completely fit the type of characters that he's been writing for the last 15 years. Snyder has always had a fascination with writing super strong, powerful female characters that are overcoming some form of struggle, situation, or diversity. The first Wonder Woman film perfectly nestled into that, along with Patty Jenkins, who was the overall director, taking cues from Snyder on where exactly he wanted the story to go. Wonder Woman 1984 divorced itself from Snyder's vision, and it completely fell under Patty Jenkins' vision. Now, I will sit here and tell you that there are multiple different story issues with Wonder Woman 1984. Maxwell Lord, the entire magical concept that was used for the wishes, the relationship, in my opinion, the strongest thing was the relationship between both Wonder Woman and Cheetah. I thought that they had a very, very great dynamic. Was it Kristen Wiig? I think Kristen Wiig was the one that was Cheetah. Yes, she was. She was Cheetah in Wonder Woman 1984. I thought she was also fantastic. I believe 1984 honestly should have been a story about two women. One woman who wants to be rid of her powers because she is heartbroken that she essentially lost the love of her life and she's listless and doesn't know what direction to essentially take herself. And another woman who has always been weak and has always been stepped on, who wants the power and is envious of the fact that Diana is essentially a goddess, denying herself the strength and the liberties that she should technically have. That should have been the core of that film. Those two ideologies bumping heads, because I think that both of the characters were playing off of each other spectacularly. That is not what we got. We got Maxwell Lord as the overarching villain. We got Cheetah sidelined to a B grade villain in a film where she should have been the A tier villain. And then, of course, it turned into a CGI fest at the end of the film with weird themes and weird directions, and it just didn't resonate well with fans. So me as the person who views this, who's made it his job to basically look at these films objectively from Chris Pine's perspective, yes, Wonder Woman was a $1 billion franchise and it did not make sense that WB or DC would cancel it. Outside looking in, there were a lot of factors on the outside. DC restructuring, Warner Brothers being purchased by a new investment group, the pandemic, HBO Max releasing in theaters like a week or so after the film came out on HBO Max, and people had already watched it in the comfort of their homes. All of these factors basically happened at the exact same time for people to turn around and look and say, okay, we've irreparably damaged. And of course, the fact that the second film was a much worser film than the first one, all of these things kind of coalesce together to make somebody at WB turn around and go, oh, we've done irreparable harm to the Wonder Woman IP and using Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman. As a direct result, we're just going to cancel the third film, send her on her way, send Chris Pine on his way, and we're going to move on in the direction of James Gunn rebooting the entire universe. So Chris Pine being stunned at the fact that Wonder Woman 3 was canceled is not too shocking to me, as like I said, actors are usually divorced from what's actually going on in the macro, where they're more in the they're more in the microcosm, where they are basically on the set, things are going great and people are telling them how great the film is, and the target audience is absolutely loving and eating it up. They're oblivious sometimes to the fact that there are a bunch of other major things that are happening that are in motion that can completely derail a third film in a series, or completely derail whatever it is that they're working on at that point in time. But I just thought that this was interesting. That he also said something on the lines of that, he thinks that DC is dead, which from his perspective, yes, that is the truth. The DC that he was a part of back then, the executives that were there back then, the leadership that was there back then, they are all gone. So, and chances are, he will not be asked to return in any way, shape, or form. They'll probably cast somebody new as Steve Trevor. But yes, in Chris Pine's perspective, when he said that he thinks DC is very dead, the DC that he was a part of is very dead. We've essentially moved on from that, and James Gunn is creating something completely new in a new universe, all to himself, that most of us, for the most part, are super excited for. Now, staying inside of the DC news, we are going to be moving on to Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. For those of you who don't know, this is going to be the Supergirl film that is a part of James Gunn's DC universe. It is going to star Millie Alcock. If you aren't familiar with who she is, she played the younger version of Rhaenyra Targaryen on House of the Dragon, the Game of Thrones spinoff. Now, we don't have a lot of information exactly as to what the story is going to be about. For instance, in the article it says Supergirl Woman Tomorrow is one step closer to entering production. The project has a writer, Anna Nogueira, which was announced back in November. After months of speculation, posts that were starting to rival the best of them, we finally got word that Millie Alcock will be playing Supergirl at the end of January. In April, we learned that Craig Gillespie will be the director. Now that the film has a release date, we could start getting more information about the other lead and supporting actors and cast. So right now, we really only have the director, the writer, and the person who's going to be playing Supergirl in the form of Millie Alcock. Gunn explained at the time of the initial Supergirl announcement in our series, we see the difference between Superman, who was sent to Earth and raised by loving parents from the time he was an infant, versus Supergirl, who was raised on a rock, a chip off Krypton, and watched everyone around her die and be killed off in terrible ways for the first 14 years of her life, and then came to Earth when she was a young girl. She's much more hardcore. She's not exactly Supergirl we're used to seeing. At the moment, we don't have any other plot details or release date for Supergirl Woman Tomorrow, but with a director and a star attached, things can clearly start moving forward. Maybe this one will start production before the end of the year. So, not a lot of information. All we've essentially gotten is the release date for the film, which is 2026. So we've got 2 years. 2 years from now, June 26, 2026, for this film to essentially come out. I have high hopes for it. I know a lot of people didn't feel that way watching Supergirl on the CW, but I do believe that Supergirl was one of the better shows. I don't remember what season the villain Rain was in for Supergirl, but that was the best season that Supergirl ever had. It was a slow and gradual decline after Rain season. I want to say Rain was the villain for season 3. Hold on. CW Rain. I forgot that there was actually a show called Rain. So let's go Supergirl Rain. I, in all honesty, forgot that there is a show on the CW for, is it season 3? Yes, I believe it was season 3. Season 3 is Girl of Steel, Crisis on Planet. Yes. So she was the main villain of season 3. I thought she was fantastic. Season 3, in my opinion, is the strongest season of Supergirl. If you're ever interested in watching the CW Supergirl show, I would say start off at season 3. It starts off really, really strong. The writing is really, really good. Just continue on from there. Moving on in our DC news, we've got news about Mortal Kombat 2. In all honesty, I am surprised that the first Mortal Kombat film actually got a sequel. But then at the same time, I'm not shocked because it rode the wave of HBO Max being an alternative to going out in theaters, where a film that probably wouldn't do good in theaters would be strong enough to draw in a crowd to have people subscribing to HBO Max, or Max as it's just now called. But some way, shape, or form, it got a sequel, which is October 2025. October 24th, 2025, which in and of itself, you know, if you're somebody who enjoyed the first Mortal Kombat film, there's this one. It's a good film to sit down and enjoy drunk with your friends or to watch with the family and the kids. Because for the most part, if you're drunk, you're not thinking about some of the more ridiculous things that are going on. And if you watch with the kids, they're not going to care about some of the more ridiculous things that were going on. They're really only going to be enjoying the action on screen. And the action on screen is really, really well done. Now, no, we're not going to go over the whole in early 2021 thing when the original came out. I just explained that. But the Warner Brothers release date is continuing to fill out of its slate of films. Something we haven't heard much about in a while is Mortal Kombat 2. The sequel is, oh, there's a typo in this one. Somebody didn't proofread. One of the first hits of the releases of HBO Max and Warner Brothers did during the pandemic has been taking sweet time to get to our film, but we know that when it's coming, according to Variety, the film has snagged a primetime October 24th, 2025 release date. The only other release around that time are Tron, Ares, and Blade. Oh, okay. Tron, Ares. I completely forgot about the fact that we are actually getting another Tron film in 2025. That's crazy. And Blade, of course, which who knows whether or not Blade is actually going to release then, because it has been rewritten and delayed so many times over the last year, which it deserves its own like 15-minute tangent on how bad they've been handling Blade for the most part. Now, stepping outside of DC, we're now going to be stepping over for a second to Legendary, and we're going to talk about Godzilla X Kong. Of course, there's an entire monsterverse that Legendary has essentially created around Godzilla, and it is flourishing. I think currently all the films together have made like $2.5 billion while being really, really good at dealing with their budgets. It's led to spin-offs on Apple TV that recently got a sequel, but a new sequel to Godzilla X Kong has been no, sorry, a new sequel to The New Empire has been announced. The writer for that is going to be the same writer who did Shang-Chi. I believe his name is Dave Callahan. Yes, Dave Callahan will be working on the sequel. However, this article does actually need an update because it says that Adam Wingard might return. He is not returning. Adam Wingard is the person who did I think he did Godzilla. He did Godzilla X Kong, and then he did Godzilla versus Kong, and then he did Godzilla and Kong: The New Empire. He will not be returning for the third film, which is fine. I'm one of the people that believes that sometimes it's probably a good thing to bring in a fresh pair of eyes in the form of a director to work on something, especially if it kind of starts to feel as though the director is kind of going in circles in regards to how he uses the characters or how he introduces certain things. Bringing somebody else in to basically take over to see if they can take the franchise in a different direction, maybe split it off, have Kong have his own movie over here, have Godzilla have his own movie over here, and then bring them back together maybe later on down the line in like 2 or 3 films. That's probably a great idea, but we're going to be keeping an eye on this because I absolutely love Godzilla Kong New Empire, because I'm telling you right now, at some point in time, they stopped acting like kaijus. They were acting like complete gangsters. They were just running around jumping folks, and it was absolutely hilarious watching Godzilla pull off wrestling moves on Kong, or watch Kong be an absolute savage by using the little baby Kong as a pair of nunchucks to beat up other angry Kongs. That was great. Moving on, we're going to be talking about Furiosa. So this article actually had me cracking up because there were a bunch of people online that were happy and a bunch of people online that were mad, which I didn't really understand why, but you'll understand in a second. So Furiosa Mad Max Saga, Anya Taylor-Joy only has 30 lines of dialogue in total throughout the entire film. Now, there were a bunch of people who were mad. I have a question. Did you watch Mad Max Fury Road? Mad Max Fury Road, her older character, I don't think has more than 30 lines. Like, I remember her final line, which was the, hey, do you remember me, when she hooks his mask and she rips off his face. I remember the line where she calls him a fool. I remember the line where she explains about the wives, where she explains the green place, where they finally arrive at the green place and she mourns when she asks Max to stay when Max comes back. I don't think Charlize Theron had more than 30 lines in Fury Road. And I know that Tom Hardy had less than probably 15, because Max as a character doesn't really talk. It's a lot of his facial expression in that film because he's dealing with his own mental issues while that film is essentially going on. So the fact that Anya Taylor-Joy is maintaining that mentality with the character, which is that Furiosa is really not a character that says a lot. She does a lot. Doesn't bug me at all. Of course, there are people that were able to go and get previews of the film. Hideo Kojima is one of them. Him and George Miller are tight. To be quite honest, I can't wait until Hideo Kojima and George Miller team up for either a movie or a video game. I really feel as though if Hideo Kojima wanted to pull that trigger, I'd be like, hey, look, just come on over here and make a Death Stranding movie. Like, you could call George Miller and have George Miller do practical effects for a Death Stranding movie. I think that Death Stranding movie would probably make like $1 billion. It'd be absolutely fantastic. But of course, you had people that were upset that, and you usually understand where exactly some of these people are coming from, because they're the same group of people who complain about the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, like a broken record, because it's basically become their defining trait. Which there's a section of people that are complaining like, oh, this is because she's a female character, blah blah blah. And it's like, not really. Did you even watch Fury Road? She said probably the same amount of Fury Road, and the male character said less in Fury Road. I think every other character, who had the most lines in Fury Road? Nux probably had the most lines in Fury Road as a war boy with Nicholas Holt. The wives also had a ton of line, but the main characters, the main stars, they didn't talk that much. Like it's not that serious. Just like even the article says, it's really going to come down to movement, facial expressions, and the little things that the actor does with their eyes, or just like the way that they might purse their lips or twitch their face or something along those lines, that's going to convey the most emotion when you're essentially watching this film. Now, jumping over to the MCU, we have to talk about Kit Harington. So Kit Harington was on the record saying that he does not see Black Knight making a MCU return at all. And to be quite honest, that pisses me off. Because if you did not watch Eternals, at the end of Eternals, Dane Whitman, Kit Harington's character, goes to retrieve the Ebony Blade. And when he goes to retrieve the Ebony Blade, you hear Mahershala Ali's Blade character tell him that that is a bad and horrible idea. Now, here's the thing, right? I think we should have gotten a Blade film that introduced both of them, where the Blade film could have either picked up from there, or the Blade film could have started back in the 1700s, 1800s, something along those lines, with Dane's ancestor that just happens to look like him, and Blade makes a promise to basically look after the Ebony Blade, but also look after the family as well. And we know that Blade's been having a bunch of writing issues for the most part. This seems as though the most logical. Teaming up the Black Knight with Blade to take on hordes of vampires and Dracula sounds as though it would make a ton of fucking money. And there are a lot of people who really do mess with Kit Harington, that they like him not only as a person but as an actor, that would show up to basically see his character just ball out with Blade killing a ton of vampires. That sounds great. That sounds like it should be the premise of a Blade film. And of course, we know that the Blade film has been rewritten like 6 times already, with the most recent version almost making it so that Mahershala Ali quit the project altogether because it was going to focus on Blade's daughter instead of focusing on the man Blade himself. But it's kind of sad to see that, you know, Kit Harington has essentially accepted the fact that Black Knight's not going to return. The MCU, Marvel in general, really doesn't seem as though it's going to be bringing back and completing the stories for any of the Eternals characters, which is a shame, because a lot of the people that I've been talking to recently who are going back to basically watch the MCU films for phase 5 and 6 are really, they're feeling a different way about Eternals. Like, they didn't appreciate it when it originally came out, but they're appreciating it a lot more now, because I think that it's one of the films that ages really, really well in regards to the performances and the story that it's attempting to tell, and at least the universe it's attempting to set up. So I feel bad for Kit Harington, because this is the second project of his that's getting canceled. The first one was definitely the Snow Project, which was the sequel to the Game of Thrones Season 8, and then, of course, him not returning as Black Knight in the MCU kind of closes the door for him in regards to 2 separate major entities, major fantasy entities. So I'm hoping that he lands something else that's a whole lot of fun, that's able to appreciate him and lean on his talents. But, you know, we're going to move on to our next story. And our last story in regards to Marvel and the MCU is, of course, the X-Men movie. So if you've been hiding under a rock, you may have missed the fact that the X-Men film, not the X-Men film, I'm sorry, that the X-Men TV show X-Men 97 has been getting praise. A ridiculous amount of praise. It is going down as probably the best thing Marvel has done this year so far. And the X-Men 97 was originally headed and written by Bu DeMaio. I'm hoping I'm saying his name right. He wrote all of season one. He was director for season one, and he was fired before the premiere of X-Men 97. Now, no one knows why he was fired. He's not saying, Marvel's not saying, but there is a belief that he was fired because he has an OnlyFans. Now, before your mind goes running off, there is no porn on his OnlyFans. His OnlyFans literally exists for the clean positivity that OnlyFans was originally created for, which it's just a thing that he uploads videos and content for his actual fans. There's no nudity, there's no porn, none of that type of stuff. But it's believed that the negative connotation that OnlyFans has led to a breakdown of the relationship between both him and Marvel. Now, moving back to X-Men the movie. It has been reported that Michael Leslie is in talks to write the story for the X-Men movie. If you don't know who that is, Michael Leslie is the person who wrote the story for the Hunger Games prequel, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I don't like this. I don't like this at all. Because not only did I not care about The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I believe that the person who should be in control of writing the X-Men characters, and shit, I would say the person who should be in control of writing the X-Men characters, the Spider-Man character, the Fantastic Four, should be Bu. He should be the person that Marvel is using to write that corner of their universe. The fact that they fired him won't explain why, and then they're bringing in somebody else that I don't really even feel as though this person will be able to understand and appreciate the characters to the same degree that Bu did. That has me worried. That has me feeling as though the X-Men film might just be decent instead of being fantastic. And what the MCU needs, what Marvel needs, is fantastic. You don't want just decent. You don't want a 6.5. You need an 8.5. You need a 9. And I think that he would be able to get your characters to that point, get your story to that point. He's dedicated enough to basically sit down and map out your next 3 X-Men movies with tie-ins with different characters while dealing with all of the characters' different stances and backstories and beliefs, and the fact that they're gonna butt heads but then come together. Yes, because when you sit down and you watch X-Men 97, is the whole Jean Scott Logan relationship there like it was in the original X-Men films from Fox? Yes. Is it played to death? No. Why? Because you don't have Logan constantly trading jabs with Scott over Jean. He accepts the fact that she's with Scott. When he has the chance to probably be the wedge to get at Jean and be with her, he's like, no, because right now you're just upset. Right now you're just confused because you've been gone for a long time. But the person you'll always love is Scott Summers. You're always going to love that glasses wearing freak. And I'm going to be the guy that is just always going to be longing for you over in the corner. That's Logan. That's understanding a character. That's understanding, that's understanding the relationships and dynamics that those characters have. Are you going to be able to have a writer who's never written a Marvel project before, that we don't even really know whether or not this person is a major fan of the X-Men and the MCU to the extent that Bu is he going to be able to portray that type of relationship between the characters? That they're a family, and like any family, they fight, but when they're threatened, they come together to box whoever the villain is. Is this person going to be able to portray that? I don't think Michael Leslie is going to be able to portray that. That's just me. But, you know, This is the decision that Marvel and Kevin Feige are going to end up going with. And we're just going to have to sit around and wait for the film to essentially come out to see whether or not he proves us wrong, or whether or not we were right originally that they fired the best guy. And this isn't the first time that Marvel has found themselves in a situation where they've fired the best guy. Just a reminder, they fired James Gunn. Now, the James Gunn firing was weird because it wasn't Marvel that fired him, it was Disney that fired him. And then when Disney realized they made a mistake and they tried to get him back, James Gunn was like, nope, I'm only coming back to work on Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I'm not doing anything else, and then I'm out of here. Guardians of the Galaxy 3, in my opinion, was absolutely fantastic and capped off a great run for the Guardians. Completely. It was great. But before James Gunn was fired, he was the person working on the universe. He was working on fleshing out the Celestials and the Nova Corps and the Annihilation Wave and the Asgardians and all of these other celestial entities. He was the person that was going to bring the Marvel Universe proper away from Earth and into the universe. When they fired him, they had to move away from the whole universe aspect, and then they started going towards the multiverse aspect, which, in my opinion, the multiverse has been a complete and colossal fucking mess. No direction. We thought we were moving towards Kang. Jonathan Majors got in trouble, but the trouble really wasn't as serious as the news tried to trump it up to be. And then he got fired, and now we're no longer going towards Kang, but we've already wasted like 4 films and 3 projects moving towards Kang, and now we don't know what we're going to be doing, who the main villain is going to be. We have to pivot. Are we still doing the multiverse? Who knows? Even though we've called it the multiverse saga this entire run, it has been a mess. Having something solid, a base you can rely on, like the X-Men, or having something solid, a base you can rely on, like both the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and Spider-Man, is something that Marvel needs right now. Because as of right now, no one knows what direction the MCU is going in. Everybody's just waiting around for the next thing to essentially occur so that they could be like, okay, I have some type of idea what direction Marvel is going to be taking us in. I can now breathe because now I can speculate on who the main villain is going to be. But so far, nothing. So far, everyone is essentially lost. Everyone is essentially confused, and everyone is essentially pissed off. This is the point in time where DC and James Gunn, if you're listening, you start releasing your content and you start dropping your movies to basically upend the Marvel cart and steal away all the fans that are basically discontent right now with the direction that everything is essentially gone in. But moving on, that is the end of our DC, Marvel, Paramount. We just ran through like a bunch of movie and show entertainment stories. We are going to be jumping into gaming. So, Microsoft. There's never not going to be a week that Microsoft is not going to be in the news. So, recently, Microsoft closed 4 game studios. And if I remember correctly, hold on. Let's see if we can find where the studios are listed. Here we go. So Microsoft shuttered 4 studios: Arcane Austin, Tango Gameworks, Alpha Dog Games, and Roundhouse Games. Microsoft-owned Activision has announced the launch of a new internal studio called Elsewhere Entertainment. So stupid. Exclusively focused on creating a new narrative-based and genre-defining AAA franchise. The new studio was based in Warsaw, Poland, is made up of storytelling experts who have previously worked on games including The Last of Us, Uncharted, The Witcher, Cyberpunk, Destiny, Tom Clancy's The Division, and Far Cry. The new studio has full access to Activision's resources and tools as it continues to increase production and development. Elsewhere is opening its search for best-in-class talent from across the industry and around the world to help create a state-of-the-art next-generation gaming experience. Now, oh, I'm sorry, I missed one last part. Elsewhere Entertainment is working on something entirely new. It's not Call of Duty, which is a nice change of pace. And as an Activision project, it's unrelated to last week's studio closures, aside from the fact that Microsoft owns Activision, of course, which you have to imagine gives it some say in what Activision does when it comes to things like launching new studios or laying off employees. Work on a new game has gone underway for some time now, though. This is merely the first public mention of the new studio, whatever it's got cooking. So in all fairness, it's not a case of killing 4 studios and then immediately setting up another one amongst the rubble. Here's the thing. You are indeed setting up a new studio amongst the rubble. And I'm not even really talking about the current 4 game studios. So back in 2006 at, I believe, E3, Microsoft announced it was purchasing all of these like small indie developers or these smaller gaming studios. I remember one of them was like Ninja Theory, and I remember there was a lot of hype behind it because the understanding from the gaming community and at the time the understanding from Microsoft was we don't have a lot of first party games. We are going to purchase these smaller indie studios. We are going to bring them under the Microsoft banner, and then they're going to create first-party games for our console. For 2016 was probably the Xbox One. That never happened. Most of those studios are gone. And by gone, I mean they are gone. Their studios have absolutely collapsed. And one of those studios I remember was working on Scalebound. And I remember Scalebound was a game I was super dumb hyped for. Why? Because it was a game where you created a character, you created your dragon, and your character went... I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice. Your character basically went out to have adventures in like this open world where you can fight on the ground with your dragon, hop on the back of your dragon, take off and fly. You can set things on fire with your dragon. There were like destructible elements. It looked interesting. It looked fun. It was at the end of its development and Microsoft pulled the plug. They canceled the game. And when they canceled the game, they also shut down the studio. So there was no hope that the game would ever be completed in any way, shape, or form. It was dragged off to some vault somewhere and sealed in the dark, never to be seen ever again. Now, we saw that recently with Redfall, which I believe Redfall was done by Arcane Austin. And it was another game that was supposed to be a first-party game for the Xbox. It came out, it ran like shit. The questing system was archaic. The combat was boring. The characters were boring. The world in general was kind of slow and boring as well. And Arcane Austin was like, okay, we're sorry. We're going to be working on basically Redfall 2.0, where we're going to get all of these systems in. We're taking a lot of suggestions from the community. We're doing this, we're doing that. And the community or the small player base that played Redfall and enjoyed it were super hyped because they saw it as the second coming of the game. They were like, okay, they're going to drop this 2.0 thing. We're going to finally be able to get the game to where it was supposed to be. It's going to be great. Canceled. Studio shut down. Servers disconnected. And the question started to be asked, is this a theme? Does Microsoft purchase these smaller studios with the intention of creating games? Now, I've been harping on this for a really, really long time. When every time I say it, I feel as though people don't listen. Because for the most part, like I'm trying to put some knowledge on you, trying to give you a little bit of wisdom, right? Every single distributor, every single major company, Sony, Microsoft, they are looking for Fortnite. What do I mean by that? They are looking for their next killer app. They're looking for a game to come out and sell millions of copies. For Sony, they just recently had that type of popularity with Helldivers 2. And they instantaneously shot themselves in the foot by trying to introduce some type of just archaic sign up for PlayStation Network. We're not going to sell the game across the world like we have been for the last 6 months. Now it's only in places that service PlayStation, blah, 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 garbage. And you see them have to scramble and walk it back because they've now damaged a really, really popular and lucrative property. In regards to Microsoft, Microsoft has not had that killer app. They haven't had a game release that in recent years that has sold millions upon millions of copies that draw people in to buying an Xbox Series S or Series X, that draws people in to basically using and purchasing games from the Xbox Live Marketplace on the PC. They're looking for that. Now, what do they have that is a draw? Game Pass. Game Pass is a fantastic draw. It's hundreds of games that you can play at your leisure for like $25 a month, and it's fantastic. You're able to play things like Power World, the latest Gears of War, Halo Infinite, so many games you can sit down and enjoy on Game Pass. Here's the thing. How do you fund and feed Game Pass if you're not creating games? If your studio is not creating first-party games, you need to fund Game Pass with third-party games. How do you fund Game Pass with third-party games if a lot of these companies don't want to pay ball? You buy them. You purchase these companies. You take their catalogs. You put their catalogs in Game Pass. You make it so that if they're making a new game, that new game isn't making revenue by itself. Like let's say Helldivers was on Xbox and Microsoft purchased Arrowhead, right? Microsoft wouldn't want Helldivers to be sold in the marketplace. They would put Helldivers on Game Pass. Why? Because they make more money that way. They make more money putting Helldivers on Game Pass and having more people sign up for Game Pass and use it month after month after month after month for 6 months because there's 6 months of great content on Helldivers than they do just selling it to you one time, because then they get a chance to double dip. I get $25 from you today so that you can try the game on Game Pass. Then I get 60, maybe 80, maybe $90 if you really love the game, but you don't want to have to pay for Game Pass every month. So you just want to own the game by itself. So you purchase the game by itself separately. How do I know this? Sea of Thieves. Sea of Thieves was a free game on Game Pass. Microsoft came out recently and were like, not only did Sea of Thieves do great on Game Pass with people downloading it and playing it, but people also went back and purchased multiple different editions of Sea of Thieves, buying it for themselves, buying it for friends, buying it for whoever. So they were able to double dip in regards to the revenue because you signed up and purchased Game Pass, and then you turned around and you purchased the game itself again. You had double access. How long is that sustainable? How long is Game Pass sustainable? There was a point in time when Game Pass was fantastic and lucrative and it was a steal. But now you're reaching a point now where Game Pass is starting to bloat. And it's starting to bloat because Microsoft is going out. They're shutting down. They're purchasing these studios. They have the studios working on games and hope that the game's going to pop off and be as popular as Fortnite. And then when the game turns around and it's not as big as Fortnite, it's not a killer app, they kill the studio. They fire all the people. Then they pick up the pieces and they jam them together into a new studio and say, okay, you guys all go and work on a new AAA game. And then if that AAA game succeeds, congratulations, that's all your studio works on from now. If that AAA game fails, they shatter that studio, they take those people, and they send them to different divisions inside of Microsoft that are working on that are locked into sequel games. You send them to 343 to work on the next Halo game. You send them over to Bethesda to work on the next Elder Scrolls or work on Starfield. You send them to the people that are working on games that have name recognition, that have brand recognition. And it's scummy. Now, Sony is not in any way, shape, or form innocent from this, because they do the exact same type of scummy shit as well, which is they go out, they purchase these studios, and then they just silently shutter them and send them to the shadow realm with like no major fanfare or anything along those lines, and it's not really being written down and recorded by news agencies or reported by news agencies, the fact that Sony is doing this shady shit in the background. But that's the plan. That is how you keep things like Game Pass and PlayStation Plus alive. That's one of the reasons why you're seeing a lot of people, a lot of these smaller companies moving away from these big publishers in the form of Microsoft and Sony, and they're just publishing their own games on Steam and having those games do fantastic. And then maybe sometime down the line, Microsoft is like, hey, I'll throw you a bag. If your game was supposed to make, let's say, $60 million, if it released on our platform, we'll throw you a bag for around 30 so that you can throw it on Game Pass and we can have it on Game Pass for like the next 2-3 years. And a lot of those companies go, yeah, sure, I'll take that bag, toss it on Game Pass, and in 3 years you take it off. And if it's popular enough on Game Pass and they want to renew that deal, they throw you another bag for 30 million, something along those lines. But don't be shocked about Microsoft closing these game studios. They've been doing it for the last decade. For the last 10-15 years, this has been Microsoft's MO, because Microsoft does not create anything. They bring in other talent to create things for them, and then when those things are created or they run their course, they shutter those studios and they shut them down, and then they maintain and sit on the IP, and then maybe a few years down the line they'll shovel the IP over to some new studio that's made up of the remnants of that previous studio, or a new studio altogether made up of the remnants of multiple studios that they've gotten rid of over time. Microsoft's MO is not going to change. It's always going to essentially remain the same. But now that we've finished talking about Microsoft, let's actually jump into a funny Sony situation. So, recently, Sony is in talks of purchasing Paramount Plus. Now, if you don't know what Paramount Plus is, and it's a live streaming service along the lines of like Netflix, Hulu, HBO Max. But one of the things that Paramount Plus owns is the rights to Halo. Paramount Plus is the streaming service that the Halo TV show basically has its deal with to produce all of its seasons. So, in the near future, theoretically, Sony would have some type of creative control over Halo. Now, this, of course, doesn't involve the games in any way, shape, or form. We are strictly only talking about the TV show. But if Sony was to purchase Paramount Plus, they would have creative control over a Microsoft IP in the TV department. They would control that aspect of Halo. Will this be a good thing? Who knows? Will this be a bad thing? Who knows? But it is something that is currently on the table and absolutely hilarious to me. Every single time I see it, I laugh, because 15 years ago, this would have been unfathomable. Not even 15 years ago, 20 years ago. God, I'm old. This would have been unfathomable. Something like this would have never happened. But it's one of those things that I pointed out before a long time ago, which is that a lot of these companies don't realize, or they're just starting to realize now, that the Netflix model is unsustainable. Netflix, I don't want to say Netflix is a lie, but Netflix isn't profitable. And what I mean by that is Netflix is a shark. It has to constantly swim, it has to constantly eat, because if it stops and rests for a second, it might die. Netflix works in a bubble, and they've created a perfect bubble for themselves. But a lot of these other major studios are starting to discover that attempting to operate their own bubble is infeasible. It's impossible. You simply can't do it because you're losing money. Netflix has to constantly create new shows, constantly create new hooks, constantly create new things that draws people in so that they continue to pay for Netflix consistently. And there are people out here that pay for Netflix. I'm one of them. Pay for Netflix every single month and only show up maybe once every 4 months to watch something. And that's it. And that's what Netflix relies on. They were the first in the market, And because they're the first in the market, people are okay with that type of mindset in regards to them. A lot of these other studios that are coming in, Paramount, Fox, HBO Max, Disney Plus, all of these, CBS, I remember used to have one. All of these other studios that are attempting to create this exact same environment, they're running into a bottleneck, which is that people don't feel like paying for them as well. People don't feel like paying for them the same way they feel like paying for Netflix. And even Netflix, for the most part, is starting to run aground with people's patience in regards to the fact that they have less but are demanding more, which is 10 years ago, you could have 5 DVDs from Netflix delivered to your house along with the best parts of their online service for for $9.99 or for $15 if you wanted the 5 DVDs. Now we're approaching a point where we're almost double that, and DVDs are no longer a thing. And there are multiple different tiers to the Netflix service that they provide. Some of them don't even show movies and films in 1080p. You're locked in to 720p. So Netflix is starting to run aground with people's patience in regards to their practices. But I did think it was funny that we've reached a point now where a lot of these major streaming services, their bubble is going to burst. And I really feel as though the only ones who are going to be left are going to be Netflix, Max, and Disney Plus. And those 3 are going to be the ones that gobble up all of the other ones. Even Hulu is just an extension of Disney Plus. They all are owned underneath that same umbrella. So chances are Hulu is going to end up being gobbled up by Disney Plus as well. And funny enough, we just saw this happen in the anime sphere, which Crunchyroll, Jesus, I'm telling you, your boy is out of it today. But Crunchyroll, which does anime streaming, and Funimation had both of their own streaming services. Now Funimation was gobbled up by Crunchyroll, and they're just one. So you're going to be seeing this a lot more often with a lot of these streaming services being either gobbled up by these major corporations that really do need their own streaming service for their platform, or by their competitors in order to streamline the ecosystem. Because for a while there, it got nuts. Everybody had a streaming service. CBS, ABC, NBC, ESPN, just everyone. Cartoon Network, everyone had a streaming service. And after a while, once they start to realize that, okay, we're not getting the type of traction that we think we should be getting, everything's kind of falling apart. Most of those streaming services either died or they fused with each other to maintain some relevance and to stay alive. But this is just a really, really short, funny story that, I thought was hilarious about the fact that, after all this time, people asking for Halo to be on PlayStation or something along those lines, that Sony actually ended up in creative control, or could end up in creative control of Halo in their TV movie universe. And it'd be super hilarious if Sony does take control, and in some way, shape, or form, this is the one thing they're good at, and they make the Halo series better. Now, moving on to our last article in the gaming sphere, before we jump into something that's a little bit historical that I enjoyed. Japanese fans are puzzled that Yasuke is in Assassin's Creed Shadows, which I'm not overly shocked by. However, this story does come with a level of a caveat, because some of the comments that we are seeing in regards to actual Japanese people talking about Yasuke being in Assassin's Creed Shadows, while some of them are genuine, a lot of these have also been exploded, or should I say, some of these have been exposed as being frauds, which is people in the States, America side, using Google Translate to create commentary in Japanese, and then having Google Translate it back to English, which is an absolute fucking mess. But a lot of Japanese gamers are confused as to why exactly Assassin's Creed Shadows has Yasuke, an African, I almost called him African American, an African as a samurai in the 16th century, alongside a female Japanese main character running around doing things in Assassin's Creed, which it's not shocking at all. I've spoken about this on the channel already. There are always going to be those type of people that they take offense to anything that's race based in any way, shape, or form, because that's how they it's their personality trait. When you make this one thing about hating this one thing your main personality trait, it can become exhausting because that's all these people talk about. A quick click on their name and a scroll through their past comments, you're like, oh yeah, you've been talking about this for like the last week. You've been talking about this for essentially forever. And a lot of these people, I feel as though, aren't even actually looking into the game itself, because what you're seeing from a lot of the commenters is something along the lines of, "Oh, how dare they make the main character of the game an African? Why is a black man the main character of the game?" Well, the game has two protagonists, and only one of them is an assassin that you can see in the trailer. There's an actual Japanese woman that she's the primary assassin, as in she has the blade on her wrist. You see her use it in the trailer. And then there's Yasuke, and he's just a samurai. Ubisoft has even come out and said that Yasuke's playstyle is going to be the bruiser, where he's big, he's strong, but he's not quiet and he's not silent, like a ninja. The female is going to be the ninja of the game. If you want to play an Ezio character, an Altair character, a traditional assassin character, then she is going to be the person you want to play as, because she's the one who blends in with the shadows, can run up on rooftops, do things along those lines. Yasuke is the bruiser. He's on horseback. He's hopping off of horseback. He's challenging people to duels. He's fighting them out in the streets. That's the type of gameplay you can expect from his character. And of course, this actually brought in a whole laundry list of other individuals who I don't even think they've ever, at a day in their lives, played an Assassin's Creed game, that are upset. Oh, how could a woman be an assassin? How could a woman take on a bunch of men and kill them, and blah, 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 as though we haven't had like 5 female assassins since Assassin's Creed's inception. We had the main character of Assassin's Creed Liberation. We had one of the Fry twins in Assassin's Creed Syndicate. We've had Cassandra. We've had the female assassin in Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I'm flubbing on a bunch of names because I can't remember them. And then, of course, Assassin's Creed Mirage introduced a whole host of not only female assassins, but female master assassins that train the main character. But, these people, like I said, they don't actually play the game. They are or the games, they are only there for the outrage. They're only there to basically drum up and fan the flames, to create an echo chamber where they could be pissed off and they can piss off somebody else, and then that person could be mad, and then that person could be pissed off to piss them off, and they're just constantly going back and forth, hyping each other up to create a situation which really isn't that serious. It doesn't matter in any way, shape, or form, because a lot of these people, they don't complain about things until there's a race angle that they can exploit for clicks and views. But yeah, that is our story for today. I was going to do the history thing, but I think the history thing is going to be a separate video that we're going to drop on the channel, because I think it's really cool. I've been learning more and more about Yasuke's lore and his history, and it's very, very interesting. You learn a lot of things that you were unaware of before, in regards to, just how exactly he ended up in Japan, whether or not he was the first African to ever be in Japan, what's going on, what happened to him when he disappeared, that type of stuff. But yeah, that's going to be the end of this week's episode. And man, did we talk about a lot, from all of the DC news to my fears about X-Men, about the X-Men movie not being written by Bu de Mayo, through Microsoft's stupidity, Sony almost and maybe about to own a portion of Halo in the TV sphere. all that's super wild, all that is super super fun. But if you have any type of comments, comment down below. Let me know. If this is your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you. I love when we get new fans. If you want to drop me a comment or keep up with us on a daily basis, we drop videos. I wouldn't really say daily, but I try to do daily, but sometimes every other day on the main channel. You can stop by on the main channel. That's Blerdly for now, because the main channel is definitely going to be in line with the podcast's name to make it a little bit easier for people to find. And I also stream on Twitch. So if you want to drop in on Twitch, run anything by me, let me know what's going on with you. That's Blerdcalibur. Just twitch.tv/Blerdcalibur. Drop by, follow the channel, let me know what's going on with you. If you have any type of questions, something you want to bounce off of me, just go ahead and throw it out there in chat. I'm usually super alert in responding to people. I say that because sometimes I play competitive games and I completely lose myself in the competitiveness, and I don't respond to chat for like a whole 30 minutes, and then I look over there and I have my usuals in there. They're like, yeah, he's locked in. Any type of comments, he's gonna get to you guys in like 15-20 minutes. I'd be so mad when they're right. But I'll catch you guys next week with a whole new video talking about a whole new mess. Peace.